Good morning, Nancy. So wonderful to see you again.
Always good to connect with you, Sue. And I'm looking forward to hearing um, your sermon in just a little bit here. When you sent me kind of your outline, it intrigued me. I love this whole topic of a radically present God, even in kind of challenging times. So um, let's just dig into it.
Perfect. I'm ready.
Okay, so one of your suggestions and messages around is like use your breath. Use the breath to connect with the presence of God. How and why does that work?
We do it because breath is from God. And so we need to remind ourselves of that. So, those who are familiar with the early stories in the book of Genesis, those are the myths about our creation. Every people has its mythic stories that explain where we came from and our relationship to the divine. And we have the same thing. It's called the book of Genesis. And in that, there's this wonderful poetry about God creating the heavens and the earth and the land and the sea and the plants and the animals, and then human beings. And human beings were literally just a lump of clay until God breathed God's breath into it. And then we became living beings. And so we are made of the breath of God. Our life comes from God. One of the words that we use to talk about God is spirit, and the Hebrew word for spirit is ruach, and ruach means breath. So it is the breath of God which gives us life, which sustains us. And so taking that time to breathe connects us with our source of life. But it's also impossible, and this goes to science, or not impossible, it's also important, and this goes to science, because science has found that breath sustains our sanity, I guess is the way I would put it. Um, we live anxious lives, a lot of us, and some more than others. We get caught up in the anxieties and the worries of our lives and our world and our friends, and sometimes that can be all consuming. And the more we worry, the more anxious we are, the more our cortisol levels rise. And science has found that if you pause and do deep breathing, and a very specific kind of deep breathing, you're breathing in through your nose to a slow count of 4, holding it for a count of 4, breathing out through your mouth to a slow count of 8, and then holding that for a count of 4. That rhythm of breathing and doing that 3 times, science has found lowers the cortisol levels, your stress. It lowers your anxiety. And one of the things we also know is that when our stress level is high and our anxiety level is high, our neocortex doesn't kick in very well. It doesn't function very well when we are stuck in those other areas of our brain that govern anxiety and stress and worry and things like that, survival kinds of things. So pausing to breathe lowers our cortisol level, lowers our stress, and allows our higher level functioning to kick in and to be aware of what's around us and who's around us, to be aware of what's really going on as opposed to what we are afraid is going on. And so breathing grounds us. It grounds us in God, and it gives space for us to really see what's going on and not be stuck in these stories that we write for ourselves that may or may not be true.
Mhm, mhm. Oh, thank you for that. That's I found myself even in as you were talking about this, breathing more deeply and being conscious of it. So thank you for that. So you've got a story in your sermon that relates to why it's important for us to kind of pray for our own healing kind of first so that we can be fully present. for others in our life when on whatever path that they're on. Why is that important?
Well, when we worry, and we do worry about, people we love who are dealing with difficult diagnoses or difficult times, when we worry about them, we tend to not be present with them. We are more focused on ourselves than we are on them. Now, we tell ourselves something different. We tell ourselves this is all about the other person. But the reality is when we are worried for ourselves. We are living out of a fear center when we worry. And so we're trying to do things that make us feel better. I am worried about you getting the medical care you need. So I'm going to go to the doctor's appointments with you. I'm going to make sure I ask the questions that I don't trust you to ask so that I can make sure you're getting everything you need. Well, that's really about me. It's not about you. And so when we're worried, we really aren't present to that other person. We aren't focusing on what they need. We're focusing on what we need to feel better. And so Pastor Eric Elnes, who I refer to in the sermon, was talking about his daughter having a illness, a disease, and I don't remember what it was now, but he realized that she didn't need a miracle worker to heal her. She needed her dad to be present. And when he was worried about her and praying for a miracle and all that stuff, he really wasn't present with her. And in order for him to be present, he had to deal with his own anxiety. He had to heal himself. And so that's what he focused his prayers on. And then he could be present with his daughter. Then he could listen to what she needed versus him deciding what he thought she needed. And he could really be present then. And so, sometimes our own worries and concerns get in the way of helping others.
It's interesting. My mother, really a world-class Olympian champion, gold medalist warrior, just the best warrior. And I found myself over time not sharing aspects of my life with her. So our relationship wasn't as close or as intimate or authentic, as it could be because, I didn't want to trigger her worry, if you will, right?
Yeah.
And then I would also say to her, like when she was like, I'm worried, I'm like, please do not send that my way. That's energy I just don't need. I'm doing my best here to have a happy, healthy, abundant life. Because everything's energy, right? Our thoughts, our feelings, our reactions, our worry is energy that we're projecting, out there in the world. So, I mean, is being worried kind of selfish in a way?
It really is. And I think that's a wonderful word for it, because when I worry, even though I may say it's about you, it's really about me. And I'm putting my needs above your needs because I'm not listening to your needs when I'm worried. And I hear what you say about, with your mom, it's like, don't send that my way, or not wanting to say things to trigger it, because that's the other thing. When we are stuck in worry, it affects those people around us in ways we aren't even aware. When I'm around people who are worried all the time or worried about certain things, I too make that choice not to mention things because I don't want to deal with that energy. And also I find myself adjusting my plans in ways that are not always helpful, because I may find myself going, well, yeah, we really need to do this, but let's not do it right now because you know how this person's going to react, and it's just going to pull everybody down, and it's going to pull that person down, and then we don't do what we really know we need to be doing.
Interesting.
And so worry really is I think selfish is a wonderful word to
And
describe it.
maybe a little bit of, maybe it's a little controlling too, right?
It probably is, and probably not consciously.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, because I mean, who among us doesn't react differently around people who are worried?
Hmm.
And yeah, there are changes, positive changes that often need to happen that we just simply don't do because we know how that person is going to react to it.
Hmm.
In their and with their worries, and we don't want to trigger their worries. We don't want them to be worried. Um,
Exactly.
and so, yeah, it is selfish. It can be selfish. It can be controlling. But I trust that a lot of that is unconscious for people, and which I think gets us back to that need to heal ourselves.
Mm.
I can't imagine it's fun to live with the level of worry some people live with. I can't imagine that's a joyful way to go through life. And so, if we can recognize our own worries, pause, breathe, and allow ourselves to really look around and say, is this a reasonable worry or not?
Mhm.
Then I think we can be in a better place. But when you're a chronic worrier, like your mom was, it's going to take a lot of practice before that happens. It's not going to happen the first time. But I just have to think, what a sad way to go through life.
Well,
What are
it's
you
out of
missing
fear,
on?
right? When you think about it, is worry is comes from our,
Hmm.
our fear, right?
Yeah.
That something bad's going to happen. And I love the simplicity. There's only like two choices. Do you operate from fear or love?
Yeah.
And so if we can catch ourselves in worry, which I'm not exempt from it, but can I, what would love do in this situation as opposed to fear?
Yeah.
Fear would have me worry and try to control the outcomes or behaviors of somebody else. But love would say, how can I help?
Yes, and I thank you for saying that. Yes, you can worry too. We all do, and some things are worth worrying about. Worry is not a terrible emotion. It's just when it blocks us from relating well to others and being present to others. That's when it can be an issue. Um, but yeah, okay. Yeah, it's how do we catch ourselves?
How do
So
we
we
catch
don't go too
ourselves in?
far down that road, and I think that's where breathing comes in.
Yeah.
Pause, take that breath, and then look around.
Hmm. Hmm. I love that. Thank you. So my last question for you is, how can we trust that God is with us, kind of even in kind of our darkest times, and difficult times? It's like, and you talk about Mother Teresa, right, and her
Yes.
experience. So how do we trust that God is present if we can't feel that presence of God?
Yeah, I think a lot of times we actually put too much value in our feelings, because if I don't feel it, it must not be real. It must not God must not be present if I don't feel God. Well, Mother Teresa's story is one that's been powerful for me, because she talks about, and I don't remember when it was in her career, and I think it was fairly early on, she stopped feeling God's presence. This woman who's literally a saint of the church, whose piety, whose faithfulness has just been something held up to be admired. In her memoir, said that she reached a point early on where she literally stopped feeling God's presence, and she would pray, and it's like, God, are you there? And she would get no answer that met her need. And yet she continued with her work. And I think a lot of that is that even though she didn't feel God, and that was tormenting to her, that was her dark valley, she trusted. She chose to trust anyway. And part of that is she had this foundation of faith, that sustained her earlier in her life, but also the people around her had this foundation of faith of saying, You may not feel God is present, but I know, I feel, I know, I see. And so she could make a choice to trust other people's experience and live out of that. And that's what she did. She trusted and she continued to do her work. And even though she died not feeling God's presence, she still trusted that God was there. And so I think that's a really important thing, because we don't always feel God. I don't always feel God, but I trust God is there because I have that foundation and I have the people around me who help. One of the things I often tell people when they say, well, I don't need church to worship God, I say, you are so right. You do not need church to worship God. You do not need to be in an hour-long worship service on Sunday morning to worship God. But there may be somebody in that room who needs you to be there, because their faith is small at that point. Their faith is weak. They are not feeling God, and they need to see you there to assure them that others do notice God and that God is there. That's important.
That's beautiful. The
Yeah,
whole, sometimes you show up for the other guy.
exactly. And frankly, that's a lot of what church is you're showing up for everybody else. Sometimes you're showing up for yourself too, but you are definitely showing up for everybody else. It's what it means to be part of a community. Yeah. But I think the other way we get through those dark times when we aren't sure we notice God or feel God, it's stop and breathe. Because when we're worried, when we're anxious, when we're stressed, we don't really notice what's going on around us. We may not notice God because our worry's trumping that. And so to just make that choice to stop, take those 3 deep breaths, and then look around gives us an opportunity to see where God is. And even if we don't see where God is, we might see where other people are that God has put there to help us, that we may have missed because of our worry. So that's stopping and breathing and then looking around goes a long ways towards helping us get through those dark valleys and trust and see God there.
I love that. I think because we're all God, right? We all have the God, within us. And sometimes it's about
that
seeing
breath.
it. It's seeing it in somebody else, right? Yeah, thank you. A lot to reflect on today, Sue.
Yes, thank you.
So, this is the first time I've asked you questions about your sermon before you've given it.
We'll see how it changes my preaching in about an hour and a half.
So for our wonderful listeners who kind of chime into this weekly conversation that Sue and I have, know you can always join us live on Sunday mornings at 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock, yes. fpclincoln.org. Click the Watch Live button.
And then there'll be a version of this conversation with Sue being shared on social media. So join in the conversation.
That'd be wonderful. And feel free to put comments in the chat box for Facebook after you listen to this, and I'll respond.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you soon.
Very soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us at First Presbyterian Church, where faith is nurtured, curiosity encouraged, diversity welcomed, and all are loved. Find out more about us at fpclincoln.org.